any one of these things is good, right? Like I'm about to talk about the business review. I've
Mm.
heard so much about sort of the death of the business review. Well, I
Hmm.
will tell you what should die is the uninquisitive business review, the uncurious business review,
Fair. Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And that's my point. In and of itself, anything in our CS toolkit is valuable, but it just needs to be used in the right way.
Thank you. All right. You want to jump in?
Please.
Welcome, lifers, and thank you for joining us. You're listening to Lifetime Value, the customer success podcast where we help you wrap up the week that was in customer success and start you off on the right foot for the one ahead of you. I am your host, the Michael Jordan of Customer Success Podcasts. My name is Dylan Young. This week's guest has held roles as a software developer, a product manager, and a marketer. And for the last 20 years, he's both worked as part of and consulted to founder-led, VC-backed, B2B SaaS companies. Boy, that's a mouthful, Brian. Most recently through his company, Carema Consulting. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Brian Hall on the show today. And now I have several questions because this is a little bit disjointed. First of all, did I pronounce your company's name correctly?
It's close. It's Carema.
Carema. Okay. Carema Consulting. Thank you, Brian. And do you know why I chose Michael Jordan?
Well, I'm assuming it's because I'm in the Chicago area,
Booyah.
and actually, he lived for a long time in our town,
Yeah?
and we would see him around occasionally, but typically he was driving downtown to either play a game or to another suburb to work out and practice with the team.
Uh, so is this the famous, absurdly large, now abandoned mansion?
Surprised you knew about that. Yes, I'm not really sure the status these days, but it was famously difficult to sell because counters were, frankly, at the level I'm probably at right now, my standing desk, right? So
Really?
yeah, it was crazy, but we've had a long history of those athletes. Tony Kukoc lives in town. Reggie Theus, who was a bull before or kind of at the end of his career, he was sort of, I think, still with Jordan, maybe in his rookie year, lived in the neighborhood. So we've had a lot of those folks up this way because of the practice facilities here.
Got it. Okay. Really cool. When you saw him driving, was he in his red 380 SL Mercedes, which I only recently learned about from the movie Air?
Yeah, and I think there's also other vehicles too,
Oh, of
countless
course,
vehicles.
naturally. He
But I hope
didn't
to be your
only ride
Scottie
around in.
Pippen today, Dylan.
You're going to be my Scottie Pippen?
Yeah.
Well, there's an argument to be made that he was more important than Michael Jordan. Do you ascribe to that?
Well, he was certainly a glue to that team, right? Every team needs a sort of another superstar.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Brian, thank you so much for being here. Do you want to talk a little bit more about yourself? I know I gave you a bit of an
Yeah.
introduction there, but do you want to flesh it out a bit?
Yeah, sure. So maybe for your listeners to get sort of the context of what Dylan, you and I will talk about today. Throughout my career, I've worked with a lot of founders of new companies, and I've helped them build out and scale customer-facing teams. So as we talk today, you're going to hear a lot of that sort of point of view, and I'll bring that up again. But I didn't start out that way. We all sort of started in different ways with customer success in our careers. My first three positions out of college were with big companies, big brands, Accenture, Hewlett Packard, Motorola.
Wow.
And what was great about these companies and that have served me so well in my career was that they had specific methodologies. So that whole concept of having a methodology
Mm.
was sort of drilled into me. Plus, they did so much in personal development. You probably everybody's kind of heard about Motorola's Six Sigma. You were always getting all this personal development. And the two areas that I think have been most valuable to me that I learned about from those companies, which I think are very important for success and customer success, are the ability to come up with, build out, execute, and gain insights from great market research. And then number one is to know how to interview. And that's either interviewing customers or interviewing candidates for roles on your team or in your company.
Mm.
Those skills were really, I had the good fortune to get those skills at sort of an early age, and they've been something that I've leaned on throughout my entire career, including in my customer success career.
Interesting. Okay, so I'm going to show my level of ignorance. Did Motorola invent Six Sigma?
No, so okay. So
Okay.
somebody in
Thank
our
goodness,
audience,
because I'm a black belt in Six Sigma,
right?
and it would be embarrassing if I didn't know that.
No,
But I
and
don't know
and and,
who invented it.
and frankly, somebody in our audience may know better, or some listener may know better than both of us. No, I don't think they invented it, but the whole concept was, you want that sort of level of consistency. I think
Mhm.
they were just big advocates of it from a manufacturing standpoint, and then they applied it to their people, their employees too.
Very cool. Okay, so you started in software development, then product management, then marketing, and now you've been in CS for 20 years. Why? Why
Yeah,
CS, and why is that the one that stuck?
yeah. Well, so maybe before I get there, let me just give a little bit of the sort of how I ended up in customer success,
Sure.
because
Yeah.
we all have these circuitous routes.
Hmm.
So I joined a software company in 2003 that was started by a couple of CPAs. And they had really sort of figured out that, and this was in years before cloud based software, right? They were selling terrestrial based software. You had to install it. Selling software, it's a company called Microsystems, selling software to the world's biggest law firms. And when I joined them to build out their marketing and professional services organizations, they also said, by the way, Brian, we've got 60 of the world's largest law firms as our customers. They're on 3-year agreements paid annually in advance. Figure out how to keep them happy and keep renewing. Right. So we
Mm.
had no vernacular for customer success back then.
No. Mm-mm.
None at all. So my title was Vice President of Knowledge Partnership. And people still laugh about that because what does that mean? I don't even know what it means today.
Mm-hmm.
But the key point was they saw sort of the value of these annual agreements
Mm-hmm.
and being much better than perpetual licenses plus support. And they knew if we could get somebody to 4.5 years as a customer, then it was basically break even with a perpetual plus subscription model. And by the time we exited that business 11 years later, our average tenure of a customer was about 8.5 or 9 years. So it became just an incredible money making business, and one, frankly, that was attractive
Wow.
to outside investors.
Yeah. That's so you were successful as the VP of knowledge
Customer
partnerships.
knowledge partnerships, right? So it forced me to sort of build out a CS team back then, and with people that again had never been in a CS role before,
Mm-hmm.
and so I made a bunch of mistakes along the way, but learned a lot in the process. And that's really those 10 years, and I really focused in on CS for the last 7 of them. That's
Mm.
where I sort of cut my teeth on customer success and developed my initial set of experiences there.
Okay. So
Yes.
then why did you stick around?
Yes. So
Is it too far gone? You just been doing it
no.
for too long?
So then once we started doing that, there were a couple things that I think sort of clicked with me.
Mm-hmm.
One was sort of the central nature of customer success within software companies, because it's really that hub and the spoke. It's the place where you have, through your partnership with customers, through your proximity to them, through the trust you build with them by delivering on their outcomes, you're able to get information and insights, the voice of the customer, from them. And when you're able to pull that into the company, back into the company, and serve it up throughout the organization, then it does one key thing. It accelerates, and this is especially important for early stage companies, it accelerates that product market fit. And because of that, then you're able to sort of see the ability to drive more renewals, more predictable renewals. You can find those opportunities for expansion, the expand of a land and expand strategy. And that drives NRR and much higher NRR. And as a founder going out for money, if you're driving really good NRR percentages, you're gonna raise that money in the time frame you want to raise it at the valuation you want to raise it. So I really love that idea of sort of getting to product market fit faster and being the group or the team that played a really important role in doing that.
Yeah. So you like Michael Jordan, you like the pressure, you like the spotlight. You're a bit of a clutch player.
Well, I do think it is important for those in customer success, like a Michael Jordan, to realize there are moments that you make your team more successful,
Hmm.
and then there are moments when you need to step up on your own too. But those making your team more successful, or in this case, maybe making your customer successful, it's really about understanding their strengths and what their goals are too,
Hmm.
and being able to deliver against them. And that's that whole concept of sort of doing the research, right? Asking the questions, capturing the voice of the customer. This is where I think that market research background for me,
Mm.
and knowing how to lead interviews, was valuable. My goal was to ask questions and shut up and hear what they had to say, and then dig in on it more and more. And that's a real skill that I think we should be doing more to teach on our teams. And the more we do in that way, the more we learn, and frankly, the more we're going to be able to deliver on those customers' outcomes.
Look, in preparing for this conversation, you came to me with one topic in particular that you're very interested in talking about, and it is the value in ensuring that your CS leader, and maybe I'm projecting, but maybe more importantly than other leaders within your organization, your CS leader should be an experienced one who's gone, should I say, through this before?
Yeah,
Is that kind of your theory? Why don't you break this
yeah,
down for us and maybe your thesis
yeah.
on this statement?
So again, a lot of my career before starting my business at Carema, and now certainly in my business with Carema, has been focused on founders of newer companies, early stage, growth stage. Most of them, many of them are technology companies. Many of those are software companies. What I've typically seen, Dylan, it'll be interesting to hear what you've seen too or heard. What I've seen is that many of these companies will tend to bring people into customer success roles from other departments within their company. It's typically not always the highest performers. And then oftentimes they'll then put somebody from another functional role over top of that team. And all those people, like so, I'm thinking about one client in my past. They brought in a financial leader to run the customer success organization, and they
Mm,
all they all did as well as they could based on what they knew. But what ends up happening is that level of productivity within customer success is going to tap out pretty quickly. And as the business looks to scale, you're going to start to see situations like customers are questioning renewals. If you're in a marketplace, they're not transacting with you. And what ends up happening is those organizations are typically, what I've seen, typically reactive in nature.
mm.
They're not seeking to really understand the customer so well. They're more like, I just don't want to hear any bad news, and I'm not really going to ask the questions to get to them. And again, this is something we see over and over and over again with early stage companies. And so the point that you brought forward, which I think is a really good meaty topic, especially given the economy right now, is when's the right time to bring in an experienced CS leader? And I guess my point is, even in a market like today's, where there's a lot of uncertainty, founders are expecting another shoe to drop, such as a commercial real estate meltdown,
Hmm.
which impacts the debt holders, which are the regional
It ain't so.
banks that have already had some problems as of recent. Companies are kind of nervous, but I can tell you, a couple of my current clients have recently brought on CS leaders, and they are having an oversized impact positive on their organizations because they've taken these largely reactive organizations and they're turning the ship around and they're making them successful by focusing on three key areas primarily.
So we'll get to those in 1 second, but let me clarify. You had asked what I am seeing. I have never seen anything so egregious as putting a CFO on top of a CS organization. That just seems illogical. But I want to clarify your statement of an experienced CS
Mhm.
leader. Do you mean someone with prior experience leading a CS organization with the performance metrics to back that up, or somebody who at least has CS experience? Because I think we've got to be open to allowing CS individual contributors or maybe just like team managers, things like that, to continue to ascend the ranks, as opposed to, a company reaches a certain inflection point and you always bring in the wolf, right, from Pulp Fiction, always the biggest and the best.
Yep.
So I'd look for a little bit of clarity from you on that point.
Yep. Yep. And so Dylan, I totally hear your point. I think it depends. Does it always have to be an experienced CS leader who's been there, done that? No. If I think promoting from within, promoting in up from the bench, having career paths is fantastic. However, I've sort of mentioned before the fact that sometimes customer success can become sort of a gathering point for maybe some people that didn't quite succeed in other areas of the company, and they kind of put them into customer success because they think they're good with customers. And those people may be great in like a customer support organization, but they may not be the kind of person that in a customer success world where you need proactivity, people that are good at asking questions, who are inquisitive,
Mm-hmm.
who are revenue generating and revenue focused and incentivized and like that. They may not be the right people. So you kind of have to look at your organization to see, do I have those right kinds of people? But I do, but I think you can absolutely bring somebody in an early stage company up from the team who doesn't have quite the leadership experience. You just have to support them a little bit more. But that's probably where a good founder or a good CFO can provide hey, here's maybe how to sort of guide your team without giving them the specifics on how to run a customer success motion.
And so, why the example of the CFO? Because, like I said, I've never seen that as an example. It almost always is somehow revenue related, whether it's the chief revenue officer directly or the CEO, who's kind of ultimately responsible for the performance of all revenue. Why do you bring up the CFO? For any reason other than you've seen it recently, or that is the worst example you've seen? Do you see, is there a synergy there that I'm missing?
No, I think it's just an example of how it could be fill in the middle
Okay.
letter
CX.
O.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
just whatever. It's just the point that you need to have them report somewhere, and
Hmm.
in an early stage company, you tend to improvise a bit
Yeah.
sometimes, and just sort
Okay.
of pick somebody who's able to say, "I'm willing to take that on."
Okay. So, what are the three? Were they criteria you were talking about? You want to?
Yeah, just sort of three areas of focus that I've seen be really important when a new leader comes on board and is looking to sort of maybe take that customer success organization and turn it around
Cool.
and make it really successful. One is that you really do want to sort of establish your CSMs as being proactive, consultative experts. In other words, they know best how a customer is going to achieve their outcome. That's one. Number two is to be very metrics driven And that's oftentimes around helping you understand where to focus my time and where not to focus my time. And then thirdly, really leveraging technology, again, to make sure that you're spending your time in the best way possible. So again, we're talking earlier stage companies. Oftentimes the CRM's not built out. Sometimes the CRM's not even really in place.
Mm-hmm.
So using technology to help do that, maybe starting to build some templates, scripts. I mean, it's kind of basic stuff, Dylan, but so many early stage companies don't have that in place yet.
It always seems like the basic stuff is what goes by the wayside when you're just running and gunning, right? I
Yeah.
want to go back to your second point
Mm-hmm.
of what a new CS leader needs to focus on, the metrics. So often these days, we're hearing that those metrics are revenue focused.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're alluding to, or is it number of QBRs in a quarter? Is it? I don't know if you are a student of the CSQL movement, but is it CSQLs handed over to sales, or how do you think about metrics?
Yeah. So I'll give you an example in one organization which was having a bit of a churn challenge. And so what they did initially was to what this new leader did was to really go back in and look through and scrutinize churn for the last 3 months, which had all been categorized. But he went back in and did the research to really sort of recategorize the churn reasons and found that largely the categories weren't as accurate as they should be. They didn't really reflect the reason why a customer left, and B, what could have been done to save them. And 8 times out of 10, there was something that could have reasonably happened to get to get that customer to renew that didn't happen because again, the workflows, the processes, the incentives weren't in place to do that before.
Mm-hmm.
So this is even before the key metrics were like KPIs were in place, but they were going to go back to the real issue of churn. You know what? Okay, so if you say churn's happening, let's really understand what is happening out there. And so that was the first thing that was focused on by the leader, which really set the stage for turning around this organization to allow them to sort of say, be honest with themselves and say, we were kind of hiding behind these churn terms as ways to describe what had happened when in effect it wasn't the true description of what was happening with our customers who didn't sign up with us again.
But from a measuring of metrics standpoint, you're talking about being more uniform with your data as it relates to churn. But let's talk like on the back end. How does that bear out? It's just lower churn numbers, right?
Renewal numbers,
Mm-hmm.
NRR,
Yep.
are you able to not only renew them but grow the revenue with
Okay.
them?
So it is revenue. To my original question, it is all revenue related metrics. So you're on
Yeah,
the revenue bus, because that is another question
entirely.
I have is how do you feel about, or what are you hearing in your conversations with customers or clients about CS's role in the revenue
Mhm.
conversation?
Yeah, in my mind, customer success is and should be the revenue generating partner to the sales organization. They should be hand in hand, focused on revenue. They should be supporting each other. There's many models to make that work. Whether it's customer success having renewal responsibility but qualifying for expansion opportunities, send them back to sales. Customer success owns all revenue after the initial sale, and sales is merely just hunting for new logos. There's a lot of ways you can skin that cat. There's not one right answer, but it feels to me today I really don't know of any reasons why, especially in early and growth stage, why you wouldn't have customer success owning revenue. as some part of the revenue process at a minimum renewals.
However, in an early stage company, well, I would say at every maturity level, uh, customer success appears to struggle to get the same resources as the sales team, very specifically around training, learning, and development. And so, in a smaller organization, it might stand to reason that that's an even starker gap between the two. For a profession in sales that is proven to be very training dependent, do you think it is smart for a CS organization to be responsible for something like revenue, but not have the resources? This is a big assumption, right? But not have the resources they need to really excel in that role. And I'm playing devil's advocate here because I do totally agree with you. But how do we solve for that? Do we just call it
Yeah,
out to the leaders that if you want CS to own that number, they have to receive the same resources as sales?
yeah. Well, I think it's when you don't find the resources allocated to customer success, the most common time I've seen that again with early and growth stage companies is when it's a first time founder. And maybe they're starting up their first business. They've never really gone through this cycle before of knowing what it takes to preserve revenue and grow revenue from existing customers. And they're focused almost exclusively on the new logos. And believe me, they need to focus on new logos,
Sure.
right? You got to bring new revenue in the door. But any founder who's sort of starting their second company, their second attempt, they realize the importance of getting some sort of CS function in there once they hit some scale of customers. And it really depends on the kind of software you're selling, your ARR, how enterprise, mid-market, or SMB you are. But getting that customer success function in there soon after is kind of the second level of business after making sure that you've got some customers and your product is starting to get some traction.
And so I think it might be evident in the tenor of the questions I'm asking. But I am of the belief, as are many, that customer success is kind of at this tipping point or this inflection point in its maturity, in its life cycle. I mean, really, it's only 20 years old about. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't even, it's not actually, right? Because back when you got
yeah,
started, it wasn't even a title, right? You
no,
got a different title entirely.
that's right.
Where do you think customer success is headed next in its life cycle? What do you think we need to do next to evolve?
Yeah. Well, I do believe that some of the economic times that have happened, COVID a few years ago,
Hmm.
put a strong focus on sort of preserving your customers and doing the things to proactively make sure that you were keeping them and delivering for them.
Hmm.
I think the economic slowdown now and the uncertainty that I talked about earlier is another kind of situation that's forcing companies to really think about preserving that revenue that you have in the door. The cost of bringing on a new customer is so much more than it is to keep a customer. So I think those things are putting even a greater focus on that need to proactively manage accounts and make sure that your software is super sticky, your software, your solution is super sticky with them. So I think if anything, the revenue responsibility will only grow over time for customer success. But you pointed out, Dylan, something really good here, which is that this function is still very young. It's
Hmm.
still in its infancy. It's still evolving quickly. And that's another thing that we have to sort of think about. And I'm sure you think about it in your day job, which is, just because you're whatever workflow or process you have in place for your team today, just because it worked 6 months ago doesn't mean it's going to work 6 months from now. And we have to constantly sort of rethink where customer success is going next. And then you get technologies like AI, which I know you've talked about in previous episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's continuing to evolve in such an enormously fast way right now that I think we still can't even imagine what the impact will be on customer success and on our customers. But you can start to see things like, are there sort of tasks that we're doing today within customer success that we can really better automate through AI? And I also think AI can probably bring a CSM a much clearer vision of their customer, a much clearer picture of them, so that they're really able to partner more effectively with customers than whatever that process is today, whether it's through your, simply your CRM and or your CS platform that you might use today.
Yeah, I want to go back to a point you made around what is effective today may not be effective 6 months from now. And I think regardless of the evolution or the technologies that are being integrated into our profession, and by the way, AI isn't a thing that will only affect customer success. It may affect us exponentially more because it will affect each one of the businesses that we serve in a different and exponential way itself.
Yeah.
And so the way in which every customer success professional is going to have to evolve will be unique to the customers that they serve, the industries that they serve. But they will also be able to begin using AI themselves. I'm a recent convert to AI. I don't know if you realize that. I still am kind of like, I don't know, and maybe I'll be dead before it's fully integrated. But it's probably not the case. But the other point I want to make is a motion that you do today may not be as effective in 6 months. I think is true regardless of the times. And if you go back to your example of something like churn and understanding why churn occurred, you cannot do that analysis one time and expect whatever your findings to be to serve you in perpetuity. You've got to do that same exercise every 3, 6, 12 months, something like that. I think it's really important for people to understand that this is the defeatist in me, or maybe the cynic in me, that you can never escape the work. The work just keeps coming, right? Because you've got to continuously stay on your toes about what's changing about your customers, what's changing about your business or your product. So I thought that was a really interesting point that you made.
Yeah, well, I thanks for further clarifying it too. I think you did a good job. Think about our solutions that are going out the door to our clients. They're constantly evolving. So just like those solutions are evolving, your messaging is evolving. The way that you're selling is probably changing a bit. Certainly, the way you communicate with your customers, the outcomes that you're delivering on as a company, they might change, or maybe they get more filled out a bit, or maybe there's one that you've always told people about, but you could never really execute against successfully. Now maybe you can. That's why these things are always causing you to change, which frankly is what's kind of fun about CS, because and by the way, to your point, the customers are all changing too. Maybe they've acquired a business, right? Or maybe they're hunkering back, and the way that in what they're doing and how they're operating, and now your solution might be needs to be sort of delivering for them on another one of the outcomes that you can deliver on. So it really makes it fun, and it makes it a partnership, which gets back to one of your earlier questions, which I really like in your episodes. Asking people why they get jazzed about customer success. It's all about sort of having that, and it's a true partnership, right? And all the things that requires of you. It's less about the relationship. I hear a lot of CS people talk about a relationship, and but I guess I don't want to preface your BS and CS, but I hear a lot about the importance of relationships. And frankly, I don't care about relationships. I care about a
Good to
partnership
know.
and driving value with us, right? I don't think Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan were buddies, but on the court, they had a great partnership, and it led to those 6 championships, right?
Yep.
That's another thing that I really like about that whole concept of CS, is just having these partnerships in place.
Well, why don't we dive in to BS and CS since you have unceremoniously unveiled your topic that you'd like to air out. Let's jump into it.
Biggest load of crap I've ever heard.
Number one bullshit. Oh, number one bullshit.
Brian, I feel like I already know the answer to this, but if you could choose one, what is the trend, catchphrase, or otherwise related to customer success that you would like to see done away with? Now, I just had to say that it sounds like yours is relationship. So let's dig deeper and tell me why or how you get around that. I agree with you. I agree with that, whether it's with my customers, whether it's internally. I will tell folks straight up, we don't have to get drinks after this, but we both want to succeed here. So let's figure out a way to make that happen, and let's set aside the bullshit, right? So talk to me about how you handle that, or how you've done it historically.
Yeah, so it's really around making sure that the team of CSMs, let's say, really understands the important information that they're looking to gather from their customer, such as, what is the primary outcome you're looking to achieve,
Mm-hmm.
right? How are we going to understand when we've achieved that level of success with that outcome? Earning the right to talk to them about, hey, we've got three other outcomes we traditionally deliver on behalf of our customers. Which of these might be the best one for us to think about once we've sort of achieved this first one, right? If you don't have answers to those kinds of questions, then you don't have a partnership, right? Because and thus it's about those kinds of business related questions that we're sort of making core to the way that we partner with our customers, that helps us establish this idea of a partnership. And if there's any other discussion around family or dogs or things like that, that's fine, whatever. But I'm more concerned about these business aspects, how success is going to happen on behalf of our customers, what makes them successful, what will success mean to them,
Mm-hmm.
such as in terms of promotion,
Mm-hmm.
compensation, just
Yep.
knowing all those things. So when a CSM can answer those questions about their customers, I feel like the partnership's in place. And by focusing around those, I think they, in effect, have to sort of be much more focused on the partnership than any kind of relationship.
If I could distill this down a little bit, I do, and I agree with you 100%. Partnership to me is not your ability to get the customer on the phone at any point or to make them laugh at your jokes. I will challenge you just a little bit in that I think partnership is your ability to ask and get honest questions to those sometimes difficult, or get honest answers to those sometimes difficult questions of, hey, where are you guys going in the next 6 months? Can we talk about selling you this other thing? Can we talk about the outcomes that you're trying to achieve? That is partnership. Now, your point was knowing what those things are, but how do you get there? You got to lean on the partnership you've created to be able to ask those questions. You don't have that seat at the table unless you've developed that partnership.
And trust, right? You've
Yep.
started to at least give them some taste of what success looked like. Time to
Yeah.
value. Hopefully, you've achieved some sort of initial time to value
Mm-hmm.
early on with them. But Dylan, I'm 100% with you on this. Those open and honest conversations are critical. That leads me to another BS and CS.
Oh, double. Go
I've
for it.
got I've got like I think three of them, but we won't do them all. But I think, and we don't have to dig into this one very deeply. But it's that whole, anything that we talk about in BS and CS, we could probably come up with. Any one of these things is good, right? Like I'm about to talk about the business review. I've
Mm,
heard so much about sort of the death of the business review. Well, I
hmm
will tell you what should die is the uninquisitive business review, the uncurious business review,
Fair. Yeah.
right?
hmm
And that's my point. In and of itself, anything in our CS toolkit
Sure.
is valuable, but it just
Yeah.
needs to be used in the right way. And those situations, I can't, I'm sure, I wonder if you felt this way. I cringe when I'm in some of these conversations where you hear a CSM and they're just talking and talking and talking and
hmm
talking and talking
hmm
clearly the opportunity is to provide an ability for that individual to know the right questions to ask in a structured way through an agenda to really get the dialogue going back and
hmm
forth, and especially getting a lot of input from the customer.
I agree 100% that I would zoom out a ton, and I have never heard it said this way, but I love the way you said it. Of every tool that has been mentioned on BS and CS, or you hear anywhere within the CS profession of like, oh, that's played out, that doesn't work. That's probably not true. What that person is probably trying to say, though, is the user of that tool is lazy or is not using it correctly in some other way. And so that tool is ineffective. And that's what they're irritated or fed up about,
And
I
they
think.
just might, and the individual, but just may be undertrained,
Yeah. Yeah.
underexperienced.
hmm
So yeah, that's sort of the idea.
Well, Brian, I've had a ton of fun, but we do need to wrap it up. The first part of our conclusion is always giving you an opportunity to call out your CS player of the week. Who out there you think is moving the customer success profession forward in the past 7 days? Who do you want to give a shout out to?
I have been listening a lot to Joel Passon. Joel is a co-founder of a company called Sturdy. And what's really interesting about Sturdy, and it's another inflection point, I think, in customer success, Dylan, beyond sort of the great CSM platforms, CS platforms that came out early on, Gainsight, Tatango, Churn Zero.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a new generation of kind of solutions coming out, many of them AI driven. And what I really like about what Joel's doing with Sturdy is it's all around customer signals. And they've captured like at least I think now they're up to like 25 different signals. They take all of your sort of ways that you communicate with customers and they pull them all together. And through AI, they find these different signals and they bring them
Mm-hmm.
forward with some context. Some of them are positive, can drive new revenue. Some of them
Yeah.
maybe represent churn. What I like about what Joel's doing is he's bringing forward these signals as part of a series of podcasts, I think, or videos called the Sturdy Signaler, and he brings on people that then also say, hey, once you get this sort of signal, here are some best practices
Mm.
on playbooks or motions you can run. And so
Yeah.
it's a really nice fertile ground of information. He just launched this a couple months ago, but I think it's a good thing for your audience to maybe check out.
Yeah, I've never heard of it either, so that's interesting. I want to check that out too. So in the meantime, I'll put that in the show notes for everybody else.
Yeah.
Brian, how about referrals and recommendations? If you could take the audience members and point them in the direction of any one thing or activity, and it does not have to be customer success related, what would it be?
That whole idea that we talked about earlier about interviewing, structured interviewing, and being
Yeah.
sort of good at that. This is probably more for the CS leaders out there. I'm a strong advocate of behavioral assessment solutions. You've
Mm,
probably heard of Myers-Briggs. Predictive Index is one that I'm trained on. Culture Index is one I really like right now. If I was to license one tomorrow, that's the one I would use.
hmm
Um, it literally is a game changer when it comes to evaluating individuals who might come to work for you. It like literally takes what would otherwise be like a 60% likelihood of finding somebody who will be good in the role if you do interviews and check references. It raises that percentage to 90% when you've got a behavioral assessment solution, a cognitive assessment solution. I'm really into
Wow.
using these kinds of assessments to effectively vet and hire candidates.
That's cool. I had never heard that percentage increase. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And then the only other one I would say is, and this is just for my own mental well-being, I'm a big advocate of meditation. And so if you've not tried it and you want a sort of an easy way in, use an app like Headspace.
Mm.
And if it's literally 10 minutes a day, I'm telling you, it makes a world of difference for me.
Brian, it's good you've listened to a couple of the other podcasts. You know that mental health is a topic that I don't push, but it comes up a lot. I'm a huge advocate of tending to your mental health, but I've never pushed it personally on here. And so you're speaking to or you're singing to the choir, I guess. Brian, this has been a ton of fun. Where can folks connect with you?
Yep. So best place to connect with me is via LinkedIn. And so to search for me, just do Brian Hall plus Carema, Carema. A lot of Brian Halls, but if you do that, you will find me. And then if you go to caremaconsulting.com, I'll point you to a monthly newsletter, which we opine on customer success and product marketing. That's another sort of focus area for us. And then if you scroll down our homepage a little bit further down, there is a report that I recently co-did with a SaaS company called AirDeck, where we did a broad survey across SaaS companies of different sizes and assessed with them what the biggest friction points were in the year one customer journey. So if you want to download that report, it's available from the website.
Yeah, well, I'm going to download that. Brian, thank you so much for dedicating your time to this conversation.
Well, Dylan, thanks for having me, and thank you for the Lifetime Value podcast. We need more customer success conversation like this to do all the things that we've talked about today, especially grow CS's role within the kinds of companies we all work in today.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm honored.
You've been listening to Lifetime Value, the podcast for customer success professionals. If you like what you've heard, please rate our show and subscribe wherever you find your podcast. Please note that the views expressed in these conversations are attributed only to those individuals on this podcast and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of their respective employers. For all inquiries, please reach out via email to dylan@lifetimevaluepodcast.com. Find us on YouTube via our channel, Lifetime Value, and find us on the socials at Lifetime Value Podcast. Until next time.
This is Brian Hall. If you have one podcast to listen to every week, listen to Dylan Young and the Lifetime Value podcast, the customer success podcast.
I like that. It was still Brian, but it was a little bit salesy. That's exactly what I need.